Good evening, Hopkinton. This is the September 17th, 2020 Hopkinton School Committee meeting. Welcome. We are meeting here at the Hopkinton High School Library, and we are live streaming to the public on HCAM through a variety of channels, the cable channel, YouTube, Facebook. I think that's it. So I would like to welcome everybody, call the meeting to order at 7:14. I apologize, we are late. We just broke from executive session. And at this time, I would like to invite everybody who is able to please rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, our first item on the agenda is public comment. I don't believe we received any emailed public comments by 5 o'clock tonight. Nancy, did you see any?
I did not see any.
Okay. Carol, did you receive any to your email?
I did not, no,
okay.
Thank you.
All right, next up is recognitions.
I do have one quick recognition, which is, I wanted to recognize Brian Karp for donating a bunch of masks for the use, which were distributed to all 3 elementary schools today. He hand sewed over 50, and then we had a bunch of other disposable ones. So each of the elementary schools has already received between 75 and 100 additional masks for any student that doesn't have one when they arrive at school. In the middle school and the high school, I have been working with just to figure out when to drop those off, in addition to some other things. So thank you very much to Brian Karp and also to Dawn Ronan, who helped coordinate a lot of that. So
that's fabulous.
Yeah.
Amanda, I didn't know, is this a recognition part of the meeting? Is it formal recognitions, or we just say thank you to people in the district? Or
it is an opportunity to do a formal recognition, or also an opportunity if one of us in our work during the intervening 2 weeks has encountered something they want to recognize, such as what Nancy just did.
I see, yeah. So just briefly, I've got 3 kids in the school. This week was the first day of school for them, a hybrid model, new for everybody. When I dropped off my son at Elmwood, the teachers and principal were out there very friendly, welcoming the kids. I would want to acknowledge and recognize that friendliness and cheerfulness and welcoming attitude that I think my other kids came home happy too from other schools. So I think I want to recognize that our teachers and principals are doing a great job kind of recognizing the needs of our kids and welcoming them back. And I know there's glitches operational with traffic and things like that first week, and we'll sort those out. But I want to recognize that attitude that was very positive and visible in the schools this week.
Thank you. I know it's such an exciting week. It's so great to be back at school. But anybody else have any recognitions? Okay. That brings us to, I believe, the financial report. Ms. Rothermick.
Thank you. This is very early on in the year, so at this point in time, there really isn't any variances to report on for the financial report. We're running pretty much at this point on budget. Things that have come up, we've been able to charge to the CARES Act or the CVRF money, so at this point, our operating budget is fine.
Okay.
Nothing to bring up at this time. Are there any questions on the report?
Did anybody have any questions?
That's great.
Yeah.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
Okay, Dr. Kavanaugh, the superintendent's report.
Okay, I'll do quick through this. This is the superintendent's report for September 17th, 2020. We are finally back to school. I do have a back to school report, so I won't spend too much time on this page, but in just visiting the schools, it was really nice, even though we are socially distant. What you see on the left-hand side is the Hopkins cafeteria. You can see that Mrs. Bolello and Mrs. Babson have put a green sign and an orange sign on each desk. So what that indicates is who will sit at that desk every single day on a green day or on an orange day. So you can imagine the planning that's gone into that. Everyone is highly sanitized as the kids are getting off the bus. That's marathon this morning. They come through the door and everybody puts their hand under the hand sanitizer and lathers up a little bit. And then, very student-centered. What you see there on the right-hand side is a classroom at Elmwood. That teacher is Emily Traskis. And Jen and I went over there yesterday, and honestly, they were actually engaged in academic activities yesterday, which was really exciting. And it might sound like, they kind of leaped right in, but they did really a beautiful job of kind of weaving in academic activities alongside, we're back to school and welcome and let's connect with friends. So a lot was going on over there. So socially distanced, sanitized, and student-centered. The construction is complete. So what you see on the left-hand side are the modular classrooms at Hopkins. What you see on the right-hand side, and I'm telling you, down to the wire. The teacher in that picture is Beth Newton, so she's at the Elmwood School. That's one of the modular classrooms at Elmwood. And to her credit, she was at the Elmwood School till about 9 o'clock at night, the night before school started, to get that room ready for those kids to inhabit the next day. So we were very, very grateful to her and Anita Kelly, I believe, are the two that are in those modulars already with their kiddos, and it was just so sweet being in there. Just a quick enrollment update. You can see the sort of history of where we've been. In July, we were at 3,832. K-12, all students, 3,988. And then by August 20th, the last report I think I did, we were at 3,864 K-12 and 4,020 all told. So we were up about 34 kids from July to August. And then on the last report, we were at 4,020. On today's report, we're at 4,019, so we really are just hovering in that spot. It's unusual for us in the Hopkinton Public Schools to only increase our enrollment by 32 in a summer. We've been in excess of 100 kids, sometimes closer to 200 kids in the last couple of years. But if we take a look at, this is just an example of the homeschooling. So what you see on the right-hand side is just a sort of a screenshot of a spreadsheet that we keep. So on the left-hand side, that's the students' grade levels. So we've got 2 kids in grade 1, 2 kids in grade 2, 2 in grade 3, 2 in grade 4, 1 in grade 5, 1 in grade 6, and 2 in grade 7. We additionally have 7 new kindergarten students who have chosen homeschooling. So of our new students, there are 19 of them in this year, but in all this year we have 30 total. And last year we only had 18 kids in the Hopkinton Public Schools who had homeschooled. One of the things that Georgette has reported anecdotally is that, as we look at only having 32 new students, or an increase in enrollment, we shouldn't say that they're new, we should say the enrollment increased by 32. We have been having some families that will tell us that they are leaving the district to go to a private school because the kids can go every day at the private school. So it will be interesting to see what happens to us, not in the 2021 school year this year, but 21-22 next year, when maybe the homeschooling children will come back and maybe the kids who have left us to go to a private school will also return. And then we may also get new kids. So it would be interesting to see if there's a big jump next year. All right, and probably Mrs. Rothmick is going to have a lot to say about this. We have 2 new buses, which is really exciting. And these are free buses, and they are electric buses. So I put some information there, but I'll let you talk to it, Susan, because it's your grant, and you did a great job securing it. So.
Thank you. So this is very new, and it's still not even completely out of the wrapping. So I wrote a grant back in the spring, and very pleased to have received this funding that will go towards purchasing 2 electric buses for the Hopkinton schools. the company that I'm working with is also the same company that is doing the battery storage for the solar over at Marathon. So we will be putting in the EV charging stations at the bus lot. Our 2 new buses will be back there. They will not, we have not actually fully procured the buses at this time. But what the buses do, the magic to this, if you will, is when the bus comes back at the end of the day, which will be around 4 o'clock, that is optimum time in the energy grid, if you will, when everybody's turning on their lights, cooking dinner, and everything else. So when we plug our buses in at 4 o'clock, we're actually going to sell back to the grid the energy that is still stored within the bus battery. So that becomes our revenue stream. And then the buses will charge back up when everybody goes back to bed at 2 in the morning when electricity is cheap. So it's very new, and maybe kind of the first school system. There may be a few in the state, but not many. So this is kind of groundbreaking, and it's very fun to bring this to Hopkinton.
So exciting.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for writing that grant.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
I love the energy sellback. That would have never occurred to me that you could do that with a bus. I think that's phenomenal.
Right. Yeah, so this, part of why we're working with this company is this is kind of groundbreaking for them in terms of, really using vehicles as part of that energy consumption, how to also get green energy back into the grid. So, yeah, it's new, fun, innovative.
Are they full-size?
Full-size bus.
Nice.
Wow.
Thank you.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
We're very groovy. All right, and that's all I have for my superintendent's report.
Anybody have any questions? We'll hear more about reopening later, right?
We surely will.
Okay. I think that brings us to the chair report. Dr. Kavanaugh, if you have the slides.
Yep.
I have a quick chair report tonight. Just
Thought I
waiting
would
on
do
the
that.
visuals.
There you go. Oh, there you are.
Next slide, sorry. So I always start with community engagement because that's a lot of what happens between meetings with us. First bullet, the HTA negotiations, as I think I mentioned last week, and I think I added the 7:30 to the list because I had omitted it by mistake. We've held a whole bunch of executive sessions, as you probably are aware, through the ongoing negotiations. We've been actively involved with that. And on 9/15 this week, the HTA did reject our last best offer for the Memorandum of Agreement, primarily citing a disagreement with live streaming, and I believe the HTA has released a statement on that probably the community has already seen. That said, I just want to thank the teachers, the staff, the administration for such a successful and smooth start to the school year. Aside from our negotiation discussions, the teachers came to school and really made it a wonderful, welcoming environment for everybody and the staff. It's just been phenomenal. So I just really wanted to give a shout out and say thank you for that. We are very proud of our schools, and we're always very proud of our teachers, and it's been good so far. I mean, one green day and one orange day. It's awesome. And, I just want to add to that while the district and the union leadership may disagree on the best instructional option for our elected remote students, the one thing that we absolutely agree on is our passion and our dedication for our students. Everybody here and in the teachers union, on the school committee, we're all so passionate that we're arguing vehemently for what we think is best for the students. And honestly, I think it's that passion in large part that makes our district so phenomenal. So thank you to everybody for the energy that you have put in to the work so far. We're always getting emails. This is great. This is my third year on school committee, and certainly the most email we've ever received has been this year so far. Just to share what we've received, or I've received in some of these. One email following up on our school committee communications presentation from last week, just asking, how do I find information, which is always a bit of a challenge. We had 2 emails asking about live streaming and particularly clarifying what that would mean for delivery of special education services, and I believe Dr. Kavanaugh responded to those. We were copied on about 30 emails from teachers between the evening of 9:15 and on 9:16, and I received 2 directly to me, expressing support for those teachers who have to live stream and asking that we ensure that we provide training, technology, support, and time for teachers to master the new technology. So that's something that we've built into the MOA, but we're also continuing to improve as we see what needs to be done. Let's see, I received one email about accessing YouTube videos that were assigned on homeschool days, which I believe Dr. Kavanaugh and Mr. Ghosh have responded to. One email about drop-off and pickup and traffic at Elmwood, which may or may not come up in the reopening report, I don't know.
Oh,
it's
it
the first
will.
week of school. Traffic is always a hallmark of the first week of school, and for whatever reason, there's always construction in the first week of school, so that always makes it also a little bit more fun. And one email about the approval of field trips, which we're going to put on an agenda item for 10-1, because we have a policy on field trip approval, and with the pandemic, that's probably going to change. I want to thank the community for approving our budget at the annual town meeting on Saturday, the 12th. It was a great town meeting. Beautiful day, and the community is so supportive of the schools, and I want to specifically call out Ms. Rothernick, who works incredibly hard to find the most optimal use of all of our dollars. We, especially this year, we've budgeted about 100 different times. We had to take money from the 2019-2020 budget, and where we had savings, we used that. I say we, I think Susan did all the work, but found opportunities to make one-time purchases that would save us in the current year budget. We've just seen a phenomenal presentation about the grant for the electric buses, but that's just one of many grant management opportunities that we have because of Ms. Rothernick and all the work you do. And the CARES Act budget, the ESSER grants, everything, I really feel like you enable us to be good custodians of the taxpayer dollars, and I just want to thank you for that. And thank you to the community. Dr. Kavanaugh, could I trouble you?
Sorry, just making a note. Sorry.
And housekeeping, I signed several warrants, some CARES Act spending, some bus refunds, and then general operating expenses, which are in the packet. And I also signed a payroll warrant, also in the packet. Any questions on the chair report? Okay. That brings us, I just got out of my agenda. One moment. That brings us to liaison reports. Does anyone have a liaison report?
So I do. So the turf field oversight committee met this morning, working out some COVID-related changes to and discussion of potentially when the fields could be used and rented for tournaments, which are currently not part of the Massachusetts reopening. We're not quite to that phase yet, but discussion of that. So that's ongoing, and going to connect with Sean McAuliffe around some, questions we have about what is best practice for what we're doing. So that was that.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, and office hours. I do want to spend just a second on office hours. We have done, I think, a pretty good job of trying to have weekly office hours during a time when there was a lot for the community to process and digest about reopening. We have had fairly low turnout for the last couple of office hours, and I guess I'm recommending or asking the committee and maybe recommending that we slow the pace a bit and maybe fall back on our more normal run rate of either biweekly or monthly office hours. How does the committee feel about that?
I agree. I think monthly would be most welcome.
I think I would agree. I think monthly in terms of maximizing people's ability to kind of connect and hear each other's questions. I think if we go to monthly, we'll get hopefully higher attendance. But I think also at this point, a lot of people's questions and concerns are operational in nature, which is not really, we're not the most appropriate place for those to go.
Correct. Yep. So let me make a suggestion. I'll put out some dates to the committee, but for the community, I think we will dial back to monthly office hours. If there are members of the community who really feel that they need more access to school committee members, please email us, and we will hear your suggestions. Does that work? Okay. Okay, new business. We have the vote to ratify the Memorandum of Understanding. So as I mentioned in the chair report, the teachers union voted down our Memorandum of Agreement, so we are not in a position to take a vote tonight. We have received a letter from the Teachers Association just today, shortly before we came to the meeting, so we will be responding to that. Really haven't had enough time to process that yet, but I don't know, Dr. Kavanaugh, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
No, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay, so again, in the meantime, for the community, schools are open and teaching and learning is happening, and we will be responding to the letter that we received when we can, so thank you.
Great.
And that brings us to the school opening update. Dr. Kavanaugh.
All right. This is the highlight of my evening here. So we are, after many, many months of work, and when I say work, that's sort of just understatement. So many people working very, very hard to get our doors open. We opened on the 16th and the 17th. And people are probably wondering, why did we have 2 first days? So our elected remote students started on the 16th, as did our Green Day cohort. They started in person on the 16th. And today on the 17th, our Orange Day cohort arrived across 5 schools. And it was really just nice seeing kids in the building. They kind of came in, very excited, I think, just to be back to something that was familiar to them and wonderfully normal. Just chatting with kids who were in the 2nd grade, for example, they had never been to the Elmwood School and just kind of took it in ways that were like, look where I am, I'm in the Elmwood School. And they told me things like they love school. Standing out in front of the high school in the morning, people will come by, kids walking, and you wish them a wonderful first day, and they say, I'm really happy to be back. So it's just been really reaffirming, I think, and I think that is true across all of our buildings. I do want to take a few minutes to say thank you to the entire administrative team. I don't think anyone has worked harder all summer long than the people on that admin team. So from central office, Jen Parson, Susan Rothermick, Karen Zaleski, Ashok Ghosh, Kim Polnick, and Jennifer Suker. At the high school, Evan Bishop, Justin Pominville, Laura Tice. At the middle school, Alan Keller, Ann Ben Bennett, Chris Ocampo. Hopkins, Vanessa Bolello and Julie Babson. Elmwood, Ann Carver, Jason Demon. At Marathon, Lauren Dubo and Shannon Dickerson. I should also include at the kind of Marathon Elmwood Hopkins level, our friend Deb Moriarty, who is our ELA coordinator. She has done so much work. And then add our AD, Rich Cormier, Building and Grounds Director, Tim Person, and Food Service Director, Michelle Babin, all working around the clock. I'm serious. If they were getting 4 hours sleep a night, it would have been amazing. In the mornings, we have had our police friends out there, so I do want to thank the Hopkinton Police Department, Chief Bennett, Detective Van Ralton, Lieutenant Porter, and our 3 SROs, Officer Powers, Officer Stickney, and Officer Santoro. Please forgive me if I've left anyone off of that list. Our Hopkinton Public Schools nurses, they've been amazing in getting us ready to, just helping our staff to kind of train. But Kathy Bain, who is our head nurse, and then Sarah Patterson, Kelly Burke, Molly Steen, Julianne Thompson, and our newest nurse at Marathon School, Candace Burnell. And that takes us to Hopkinton High School. So on the right-hand side, you just see the kids going in this morning. And they did a really nice job here at the high school of kind of, decorating. So not only did it say 2021, outside the front door, but as you came in, there were lots of green and orange pennants and balloons, and it was just so festive. On the left-hand side is the 18 to 22 program. They were all outside on the basketball courts today when I came through, sitting socially distanced and taking a little bit of a mass break, but they were also using the time to talk up business. They are planning kind of a Grubhub business where they go and take lunch orders from folks, and they can do that at the police station, the fire station, central office, and then they pick up the food and they will deliver it. So that's their latest business enterprise. At the middle school, on the left-hand side, you can see everybody in their numbered desks having lunch in the gym. In the middle picture, we have a classroom, and on the right, you can see 2 tents that are set up behind the high school and middle school that are sort of shared between those 2 buildings. Here at Hopkins, I could not resist. On the left-hand side, you see the Hopkins custodian with his Pure Tab gun spraying down desks after lunch so that is entirely disinfected for the next person to sit there. Mrs. Babson is on the stage guiding kids through that whole lunch process, and I think yesterday they may have had some entertainment on that stage as well. And then you can just see the Hopkinton arrival pictures over on the right-hand side. I think that kids were just so festive and lots of music and excitement. Here's Elmwood. I really wanted to show you just a whole classroom scene there. You can tell there, I think there are about 12 desks, maybe 12 desks in that room. And over on the right-hand side, you see Foundations, but what they're doing in the middle there is just one of the interactive read-aloud texts from Fountas and Pinnell. So they were already doing that work, and if you remember back to the picture of Beth Newton, and this is not Beth Newton's classroom, the very first lesson was, would you want to be friends with? So what's really nice, I think, about the Fountas and Pinnell work is that it doesn't just teach ELA skills, but it also does a whole lot of, sort of those cultural and friendship and those kind of SEL kind of pieces. Here we are at Marathon. In the bottom left, you have one of the teachers who is a remote teacher. So there she is on Zoom, reaching out to all of her kiddos at home. Top center is a gym class at Marathon. Bottom center is a kid who's quite clearly pretty excited to be back in the classroom, and over on the right is a mask break under the tent at Marathon. I keep saying center. And what about the traffic? Here we go. So the traffic has been our one problem, I think, with the opening of school. Everything else, knock on wood, has gone pretty swimmingly. We had asked many parents if they would be willing to drive their kids to school because we were limited in how many students we could put in a bus. We were able to put 26 students into a 77-student bus. And parents across the district were so gracious, and they said, of course, if that helps us to open our doors, we are happy to drive our children. Well, now we have a reverse problem because we have very, very few kids on the buses and many cars going to all of our schools. So if there are parents who are thinking, I wouldn't mind taking a little break from that driving and put my children back on the bus, if they could contact transportation, that might be helpful to us. And I do want to say thank you to parents because when we were in a tough spot, they really stepped up and helped us out. Now, I know people are saying that, the traffic was pretty bad at the middle school on day one, and, that ended up backing things up at the high school on day one, but it seems to me that the school that's taking the traffic cake, so to speak, is Elmwood. And if we could just add insult to injury, today at dismissal, an 18-wheeler took a wrong turn. And Mrs. Carver, I think, had nothing more to do than go out there and just take a photograph at what turned something that was already pretty bad into disaster. So she was like, is that an 18-wheeler? And it turns out, yes, it was an 18-wheeler.
What is it about Elmwood? I have actually heard some Elmwood comments, and I'm just curious, what makes Elmwood so tricky right now?
I really don't know the answer to that. I do know that, as we're picking up and dropping off, we always take the kid like a license to make sure that, that is we're handing the student to the legitimate person. And maybe part of the trouble too could be, if you think about the way Marathon works, there's such a long driveway that you can pull people in off of Hayden Rose Street, but there's not much really in the way of pickup space there. So we're working on it.
Wow.
Yep.
That's not a welcome sight right there.
Do we have, you mentioned before that police department helped across the district, and they're helping with traffic, especially during the first couple weeks, is that right?
Yes, so one of the problems that we've seen in this building, for example, is in the morning, we haven't been opening our doors until 7:15, which should be fine, but I think some of the parents pull up and they just stop in that area up there, so now the traffic starts backing up. So I would really ask if you are a parent who is dropping off at the high school, and some people just let their kids out of the car and the kids will mingle outdoors, but if you are a person who would prefer to keep your child in the car, if they could find a parking spot from 7 o'clock to 7:15, that would allow those who just want to drop off to kind of flow through. That would be an important thing for folks to do. Okay, and I think that's all I've got for you, so thank you.
Any questions on the reopening report?
One comment, if I may.
Please.
In support of the buses, my daughter has reported there are only 5 students on her bus, so there's certainly room to be socially distant with additional kids.
Yes.
So I will tell you that I have made over 60 changes today.
Oh, that's good.
Fair warning.
Towards the buses or away from the buses?
On the bus.
That's okay. If it'll help traffic. 60 across 31 buses? How many?
You don't even want to know.
Well, thank you for that. And thank you to the parents who are signing back up for busing, now that we know the capacity. Okay, I think that moves us on to Mr. Bishop. I think we're ready for the high school handbook. We're actually a little ahead of schedule.
Shh.
I shouldn't say that, but I'm happy for you because your
Jinx
day
it.
starts so early.
Well, I don't plan on being very long, so I'll keep you on schedule. Hello, everyone. Nice to see you all. Thanks for having me. Before I jump into the handbook editions at the high school for the 2021 school year, I do, like many of you have already mentioned, want to thank our students and our staff for their efforts, their understanding, and their cooperation. I really feel that we are off to a good start. Obviously there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of kinks that we're still trying to work out, and getting used to this new normal. But the vibe at the high school is really positive. It's been really great to see the students, and you can tell the students are really happy to be back here at the high school. And I can't say enough positive things about the staff. They are not only teaching students in front of them, they are live streaming students. Some of them are teaching remotely to students here at the building, and some are also teaching their own remote section. And so it's pretty impressive when you think about all the different ways that we are trying to educate our students, and I just want to say thank you to all of them for their efforts. So we, as many of you are aware, over the last few years have done a kind of a pretty big overhaul with our handbook. So we really don't have any new additions this year with the exception of the COVID-19 pandemic addendum. And so I'll just review some of those points out of this addendum. I'm sure it's kind of repetitive. We've been having a lot of these conversations throughout the course of the summer, but I'd be happy to go through this and then answer any questions that you have about that or just in general about how the high school is going since we've been open. So when you look at the addendum, there's really 2 main components. One is kind of the expectation of behavior when we're talking about remote learning time and the use of remote learning platforms, and the others around safety requirements. So in regards to, at the high school, and specifically when you talk about the educational program that we're offering via remote learning, we're focusing a lot on Zoom at the high school. Not so much Seesaw like it is at some of the other levels. Obviously, Schoology, we're getting our heads around and working at the high school, as well as tech and virtual high school. So those are a lot of our platforms. And the code of conduct, I think, is really important to mention that governs our student when it comes to discipline, bullying, harassment, and discrimination are all applicable during this remote learning time and when using these remote learning platforms. And we've been expressing that to our students, so they're aware of that. Also really important to note when we talk about expectations of behavior is that when we're in this remote environment, that parents and students are prohibited from recording and disseminating remote learning lessons or instruction. I know that we have messaged that with families and also with students, but it's important to again mention it. And also parents should not engage in, interrupt, or attempt to participate in any of the classroom process. So those were some of the expectations around behavior. Again, we're continuing to message that with our students and families. The next section of the addendum really is around safety requirements. And we've talked a lot about this over the course of the summer. And I must say, the students have done a wonderful job when it comes to following some of our new safety protocols to start the school year. The first is obviously around masks and face coverings. Every staff member and student is required to wear a mask at all times, whether it be in the building, on school grounds, whether we're outside at school-sponsored events, although we haven't had really any of those, as well as on transportation, even when social distancing is being observed. We have had over almost 1,100 kids in the building over the last 2 days, and we haven't had one issue with students wearing masks and staff wearing masks. Yes, it's a little bit hot. I think I've heard from a lot of staff that they're getting sore throats. It's kind of getting their kind of teaching legs back under them, but also having to talk a little bit louder with the masks, but no real issues with anybody not wearing a mask, so that's been great. We have talked a little bit about the type of mask that students and staff are expected to wear. We're not allowing neck gaiters or bandanas. I haven't seen any of those at the high school, which has been good, so students are certainly following those instructions. And it's really left up to the building administration when it comes to dealing with situations like that if a student were to bring one into school. So we also have talked to the students about wearing appropriate masks in terms of no vulgar language or anything on the actual mask. We haven't seen anything like that, which has been nice. We have instituted mask breaks, and we talk a little bit about that in our new addendum as well. Those have worked out great. What we're doing is between first and second period, sending half the students out of the building. We send the second floor and the C wing out the front of the building and the first and third floor out the back of the building. So we have about 150 kids or so at each location. They've been spreading out. As long as they're 6 feet apart, they can take their mask off. We're out there for about 10 minutes, and while that group is outside, the rest of the school is going to their next period class. So we're kind of not having so many students in the hallways during passing time. That's worked out really well. And so that's an opportunity for students to take their mask off as well as during lunch. And the policy talks a little bit about how that works. I know you can see into the athletic center as well as the cafeteria. That was one area going in. I had a little bit of concern about how that was going to work. And I think the lunches have gone well so far. Students have gone into either the athletic center or the caf. They've sat at their desk. They've been using the QR codes. And yes, a little bit awkward at first. I make an announcement at each lunch saying, I know this is a little bit different. We're going to start playing music in there, so it just feels a little bit, a little bit energy in there. It's a little bit quiet right now, but I think students are kind of getting their heads around it, and they've done exactly what we've asked them to do. So that's been great. The other areas that are talked about in the addendum is around physical distancing. I know we've talked that we're aiming for that 6 feet distance between students. So every one of our classrooms is set up with desks that are 6 feet apart. The most amount of students in a particular cohort in any classroom is 16. So that is really what we felt was the limit of desks in a classroom to make sure that we keep our 6 feet, and we're sticking to that. It also talks a little bit about students being in cohort groups, which we know we have our orange and green at the high school, and it focuses a little bit on hand hygiene. As you've walked in, I know you've seen some of the hand sanitizers as we come into the building. Every student coming in and out from mass breaks, coming in and out from senior privilege, and then between class is supposed to wash their hands and use the hand sanitizers. We have those in every classroom. We also have spray bottles and paper towels. So at the end of every class, what we're doing is the teacher is spraying all the desks, and then the students are taking a paper towel and wiping off their surface. And then at the end of class and the beginning of class, we do that. So that's worked out really well. And when staff is in need of more supplies, because I know that was a concern, we have a Google form. They can fill that out. We see it in real time, and we're able to bring that to them. So that's worked out pretty good. So the policy talks about, if students were not to wear masks or were not to social distance, you don't want to focus on the negative, but if that's the case, then it's the principal's discretion to either send that student home or discuss maybe, is this the right learning platform for them? So that's all spelled out in the addendum here for the COVID-19 pandemic part of the handbook. It's at the end of our handbook. That's where we put it. So I know a lot of this is repetitive, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about either the handbook or just anything about the high school.
Thank you very much. Before we go to questions, I'll just say for the community, the handbook at the high school and the middle school are considered district policy, which is why we hear this before the school committee. So I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Bishop, every parent and student has to sign off on the handbook.
That's correct. Yes.
And you'll see a lot of language reflected in the handbook that you may also see in policy documents for the school committee. So just to clarify that's why we see the handbooks, is why they come forward. And this document that you put together is to be sort of in place while we are under pandemic conditions.
Correct.
It's just an addendum,
Just
so you
an
don't have to
addendum
get
for the
into the
school
meat
year.
of the handbook
Yep.
and muck with it. You can just keep this separate. Okay, so, any questions?
I actually have a question. I was wondering if you had any changes to the absentee policy due to COVID in the handbook.
Sure. Yeah, so we've been talking about that quite a bit. And at the high school, which I think is a little bit different than the other levels, we attach credit for classes to attendance. And so if a student misses more than 7 days of school in a semester, we could take away credit from them. I think given the situation that we're in, given the circumstances, we want students to stay home when they're not feeling well. So we've talked about waiving that policy where we would take away credit from students. It's not officially been put in the handbook. We're still working that out in logistics, but we feel we'll be very reasonable when it comes to that. And when we put some language in, I'll let you all know. I'm happy to come back and add that to the handbook.
Okay, that would be great, because I'm sure there's a lot of parents who are very nervous
Absolutely.
about that.
We're usually pretty lenient when it comes to that in general, because obviously people are dealing with different things, but especially now, if students are not feeling well, we want them to stay home. We don't want them to feel like they have to come in because they don't want to lose credit for a particular class. That's not what we want. So we'll make sure we message that out to the students.
Thank you.
Who else has a question?
Mr. Bishop, we had a question last night in office hours from a parent about classes that were taught by teachers remotely being zoomed into the classroom.
Yes.
How many of those do we have at the high school?
We have 5 teachers that have been granted accommodations through ADA to be working remotely, and that will be Zooming into classes where we have, and I think the last time I was here, I talked a little about getting some paraprofessional support to be in those classrooms. So there are 5 total. 5 total teachers, which if you add, that's about 20 to 25 sections of classes.
Okay, and how's that going so far?
Like I said before, there's certainly, we're getting our heads around it and working out the kinks, but, and certainly I want to give Mr. Gosham credit and his technology staff. They've been working countless hours to start the school year. I think as good as it can, as we expected it to go, and I think it's only going to get better as we get more and more comfortable with it.
Okay, thank you.
Nancy, do you have any questions? Or?
I don't, I'm amazed at how many moving parts there are to making the high school open as well as it has. Things have come together better than, certainly from the in-person perspective, than I would have ever expected. I know that the technology department is working out all kinds of different issues for different sets of learners, but just thank you for all of this.
Yeah, like I said before, I think it's a team effort, certainly, and I thank the students and the staff. They've been wonderful. The students have really bought into what we've sent to them over the summer. They've clearly read the letters, they've clearly watched the videos, and they've been doing a wonderful job, and I expect that to continue.
I would love to say that your video was wonderful. They did a really nice job with that.
The student video?
Yes.
That was so good.
Yeah, it was wonderful, yeah.
It was
really well
great.
done.
I love the
You
one-way
can- you can-
hallways.
Yeah, you can see and just hear from the students how much they want to be here and how, whatever it takes to follow the rules to be able to stay here in school. Obviously, they've probably seen the news in some other communities and students aren't able to come back to school. They want to be here.
They made it look so easy. Like, we think, oh, this is going to be, you know what? You just put your mask on, you stay 6 feet apart. It just seemed like, okay, of course, this is common sense. They made it look so doable. I thought it was a really great video. Do you have a question, Joe, about that?
No. I was just thinking about the technology. I mean, it is amazing when you think about, as you described, you've got students in a classroom with teachers. You've got teachers in a remote location with students in a class. You've got some teachers in the school with students in a remote location. Then you got some teachers now with a kind of hybrid, kids in the class and remote. And we couldn't have done this not too long ago without the technology. And I'm not generally an advocate of too much technology in the way of learning, but this is the communication part of the technology is critical for us to be able to execute the way that you are today.
Yeah, it's been impressive. And when you mention those different instructional models or whatever you want to call them, some of the staff members are doing multiple ones of those. They're not just having students in front of them. They could be have one class with students in front of them, one class live streaming, one class doing fully remote. It's really remarkable what we've asked them to do and what they've been able to do so far. And I know that they work so hard to be so good at their craft. And I think some of them can be a little discouraged to start because it hasn't gone perfect the way that they want to, but it's still really, really good. Really, really good instruction. It's only going to get better. And I think the more that we provide them with the technology they need and they get more comfortable with it, I'm excited to see where it's going to go from here.
And there's a
Understood.
lot of technology still coming.
Correct. That is correct. Yep.
And just hearing you describe all the ways in which the high school is different this year. I mean, this is the first time any of you have done any of this. So I think, I know that the families are they're very prepared for sort of an on-ramping period. It's new to everybody. That people are just so thrilled that you have created a situation in which their kids can safely come to school. That as we work out the kinks, I think, everybody's totally eyes wide open that we have work to do and we'll address the problems as they arise. And I think we as a school committee, want to hear if you need money, if you need, do you need equipment? Do you need more technicians? Please let us know because I think it's important that you have what you need. This is a complex machine and I'm sure you couldn't predict everything you needed in August. So
Yeah.
please keep us informed.
Well, I
on
appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah.
I have one question about the addendum.
Yep.
And it's come up in some conversations. I'm just wondering about the calculation of GPA, because I know now, I think the calculations tend to, it's stated that it's restricted to the classes that are taught at the high school, and I didn't know if there was any consideration of adjusting that, or even if there's been talk about how last spring factors in. I think
Sure.
for some kids who are upperclassmen, thinking about college
Yeah,
transcripts and all that, their GPA matters, and
Of
just
course,
didn't know if you
yeah,
had any
no
thoughts.
question. Yeah, I can start with that. So, as we all remember, last spring, we went with a pass-fail model. And we had a lot of conversations with the current seniors, then juniors, about how we're going to work with them when it comes to their grade point average. A lot of students now, the trend is to apply early to college. We have not heard anything from colleges. They're pushing back their deadline, so that's still usually around November 1st, November 15th. And if we were to send students' grade point averages to colleges, the seniors, by November 1st, and kept that pass-fail like we did at the end of last year, the last time we would have recalculated their GPA would have been the middle of their junior year, if you think about it, because we don't really calculate GPAs till the middle of the year or the end of the year. So we talked a little bit about how can we help that group of students try to improve their grades, improve their grade point average one more time. And so we agreed to recalculate just the current seniors' grade point average at the end of October. So they'll have one last opportunity when it comes to grade point average to be able to have an impact on it before they apply early, if they do apply early. But we'll recalculate either way if they don't apply early. So then they'll have a GPA recalculation end of October, then again in January, February, and then again at the end of the year. So they'll have one extra one, which was kind of taken away from them last year. We felt that that was an appropriate thing to do for them. And then in terms of the other part of your
Which
question.
classes? Will like, if someone is enrolled by necessity?
Oh, sorry, yes, yeah.
In a non-high school class, like we always have had kids taking a VHS class or an elective here or there, but if it's out of necessity and they're in a non-Hopkinton class, would that count or not?
It does, yeah. So
Okay.
VHS and tech classes have counted.
They do count?
They do
okay.
count, yes. If a student took a class, let's just say, through a college, maybe some students take a class through BYU online, that's kind of something we've had some students do in the past. That grade will be on the transcript, but won't count toward the grade point average, because
Okay.
that's done through them, they've actually paid for that course. But since we are connected with VHS and tech, if a student takes a class, that grade is on the transcript and is included in the grade point average. And there's been a few instances this year where there wasn't an honors option for a student to take on VHS, and we're going to be able to grant that student the honors credit, even though there wasn't an honors option for them.
So it'd be
that's another
weighted
thing
like
that
an
we've
honors.
decided to do for some of our remote learners, yeah.
Okay, great, that's helpful. So I'm going to be very honest, I don't think I read all the details of
Yeah,
the
no,
handbook today.
yeah,
So
sure.
I guess if there may or may not be, I need to put a little caveat on this addendum that says there may be some, I don't know if the language still holds, but in case anyone's curious, and maybe we just say, under pandemic conditions, there may be a different calculation. See your guidance counselor or whatever, I don't know. just a thought. It may already be worded perfectly, honestly, I didn't commit it to memory.
I don't think there's anything in this is more safety, more behavior expectations, but certainly we can communicate that with our guidance department to our senior class and parents.
I'm dazzled by the work you've been able to accomplish this week, so thank you to everyone under this roof.
Thank you, I really appreciate it, yeah. And I can't say enough positive things about the rest of the admin team. Justin Palmerville, Laura Tice have been amazing, great team. Laura Tice, brand new to this, at such a time to start, and it's been wonderful, and Justin Palmerville is as good as it gets as an assistant principal, so we're lucky to have him, so I just wanted to thank them as well.
Definitely. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Everyone good? Okay, thank you so
Thank you,
much for
everybody.
coming.
Thank you, Evan. That was great.
Mr. Keller, I think we're up with middle school handbooks. Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry. I think we have to vote. Thank you, Nancy. I'm so excited about what's happening that I forgot the vote.
So are we voting on, you need a motion to approve the addendum to the high school handbook?
Let's see how it's written.
Motion to approve the 2020 to 2021
Can I-
high school handbook.
Can I ask a procedural question?
Yes.
So, Mr. Bishop said that they were still working on the absentee policy, so can we approve and then approve the change? Is that how it works?
Just a vote tonight.
How would you like to handle it? This is a recommendation from you, Dr. Cowan. Do you want us to approve what we have with the caveat that we'll have an attendance update coming, or do you want us to hold the vote till another?
So you could really do either one. It might make better sense to approve what we have now, because then it's in effect, and we are living in the time of COVID, and then if there's an addendum to the addendum, we could take care of that.
Okay, sounds good.
Kind of like how we did the face covering policy.
Yes, 4 times.
So, Dr. Cowan, I think it's your motion here, actually.
Yes.
Our motion, but she recommends.
Yes.
The superintendent
So
requests.
I would recommend that the school committee approve the 2021 handbook revisions as presented by Mr. Bishop.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Meg, second by Leah. All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
All opposed? None? And it passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Good evening, Mr. Keller.
Good evening, everyone.
Thank you for coming.
Of course, thanks for having me here.
Thank you for coming.
So I believe, Dr. Kavanaugh, the COVID-19 addendum that's in the middle school handbook is identical to the high school handbook.
Correct.
So I'm happy to go over things, but I think it would be a repeat of what Mr. Bishop said. The key points in there are no recording of Zoom sessions, face covering and masks, physical distancing, and if a student is unable to follow the protocols, that they could go to full-time remote. The other pieces that we have that are different in the 2020-2021 middle school handbook are that in the past, we had a reference to the district bullying prevention and intervention policy, and now we actually have those linked in the student handbook. And we also have the bullying report form that is linked in the student handbook. The third piece that's different about this handbook is with regards to tardiness. We now have wording that's updated to match the school committee policy, which basically talks about, in the past, we said that there were no excused tardies, and now tardies for specific reasons, and so that is matching to school committee policy. And then the last piece is, in the past, we had a behavior rubric, which was a nice piece that one of our art teachers put together. What we found, however, is that behaviors, we had a list of behaviors, and then we had a series of consequences. So first consequence, second consequence, third, fourth. We found that to be somewhat limiting. So there is a time when a student might be doing something that we feel like we need to jump to the second, something that was in that second consequence category based on a pattern of behavior. And so we put together those consequences all under one category now. It also makes the process it also makes the handbook a little bit easier to read. And so those are the substantial changes to this handbook.
Does anyone have any questions about the middle school?
I have a question about the tardies. I know this is kind of a unique situation with the transportation that we're going through right now, but I would assume that the traffic which was backed up from the 495 side of town that backed up all the way to the corner of Pleasant and Main probably was causing some additional tardies.
Yes, certainly. And so we're working on that to improve arrival to school. And so with the cooperation of the police department today, we had a lot of folks helping with that. And I've spoken to Dr. Kavanaugh multiple times about this. So we wanted to study it again today. We're going to take a look at it again tomorrow because there was some improvement. But ultimately, we believe that we're going to make a substantial shift to that. Having said that, with this different model, homeroom doesn't actually begin until 7:35.
Oh.
So we did not have any students who were actually late. So we built in time into our schedule, recognizing that with the staggered arrival, that things are going to be different this year.
Right, I forgot you had I forgot the middle school has that staggered
Yes.
arrival and drop-off. I just want to echo what I said to Evan a few minutes ago, just the amount of thought that's gone into figuring out all these different things is phenomenal. So thank you for all that.
Thank you.
I don't have anything else on the handbook.
Yeah, he went first, so we buried him in the accolade. A lot of the same apply to you and your team.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. And I assume the dismissal policy is the same thing. You're still in discussion with it?
In terms of a student being out of school?
Yeah.
So at the middle school level, it's different in that credit is not associated with an absence. That's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So for us, when a student is absent from school, we have that, we all at the district level have certain protocols or procedures that we follow based on number of absences. But what we've always done is had conversations with students, and if we feel, and with parents. And so we have put practices into place to help a student get there. But there is no, and so sometimes if we need to, and we in concert with a parent, we might say that a student might have to do a Saturday school, so come here to the high school and have their detention here at the high school. But we work really hard for it not to be a punitive situation and work with the family. So in terms of, we're not having conversations right now about our policies around absences because we don't have anything academically associated with it. So that's something that we've always, and certainly we can have a conversation about that, but that's something that we have always felt like at this point it's a learning process, and we work with families to see that. So we would certainly not want a student who is feeling a little bit ill to come into school, and that's something we'll certainly communicate.
And that was part of the policy that we passed as well with regard to attendance, was that any COVID-related symptoms were an excused absence, which would not then, and I'm asking this, would not trigger then the letter that comes out?
Right, yes.
Okay.
Great. Well, do you have anything else you want to say about the first couple of days?
Yeah, I do. I
You're
felt
still
like I didn't know if I should wait
standing
until
and-
after this was voted on, but yes, I certainly do. I mean, it's definitely, there's a lot of people to thank, and I know Dr. Kavanaugh has thanked a lot of them, and Evan mentioned a few of them, but first, it was just really exciting to see students back in the building, to see our staff welcoming them and be really excited. And I heard what you said earlier, Joe, just like seeing smiling faces there, and it was and seeing our students and parents just being so happy. And so the community has been incredibly supportive, incredibly patient, very appreciative. We've gotten a lot of emails saying how great it is to have children back in the school. And I think it's also, I also want to mention, because I think it's easy to overlook because so many changes are taking place in the physical building. We have a lot of kids that are learning remotely, and those families who made a choice, and so we've gotten a lot of positive feedback from those families, and we have teachers working really hard to deliver quality lessons to those families, and teachers who are, essentially changing their whole delivery method. And so that's been a significant shift, and it's required a lot of attention, and the technology team has been outstanding in supporting them. The nurses have been amazing. Like those first 10 days, I don't know where we would be without having those 10 days to really get all this down. Assistant Principal Ann Benbenick and Assistant Principal Chris Ocampo, we essentially had to turn our middle school model on its head, because a really big part of middle school is being on a team. And having 100 kids work with 5 teachers, and those 5 teachers really know those kids well, and they transition. We still think we're still working on figuring out how we can make the team model work well at the middle school in this different kind of climate. But it's, everything's kind of on its head. Teachers are going from class to class, kids are staying in the same classroom, and so we're trying to find ways to make this special and unique. And just talking to kids the past 2 days, they've talked, that are in the building, obviously, they have talked about how it's different, how it's a lot more quieter, it's a lot cleaner, actually, the hallways, because we're not using the lockers, but they said it's just really good to be back, to be connecting with teachers, to be seeing other students, and so it's been a really positive thing. Tim Person from Buildings and Grounds has been instrumental and hugely helpful in the building often. Today, he was there in the afternoon as we got a storage trailer in to help with some of our furniture needs. But it was certainly a lot of work. It was, I give credit to Dr. Kavanaugh for continuing and having this vision and working with all of you, but it was a lot of work, and there were times when, as I said to her recently, I doubted if this was going to work, because there was just a lot of moving parts and a lot of, we have kids in places that we haven't had them before and using the gym for lunch, but the first 2 days have gone really well, with the exception of arrival in the morning when we're working on it, but it's good to be back.
I have to say that driving past the middle school with the chain link fence, with all the little signs on the chain link fence, was really wonderful. It totally made me smile. That was beautiful.
And can I ask a question? I know the middle schoolers are carrying 70-pound backpacks right now to school, back and forth every day. Will there be any opportunity for them to store some of their things at school?
Yeah, so that's one of those things that we're still trying to piece together and figure out. And so we wanted to have these first 2 days down to see what, so the issue that we encountered, without having to be able to say definitively what it was going to look like, is we have related arts teachers who do a lot of projects traveling to those classes as well. And so with having 2 cohorts in a classroom and having projects that they're working on, say in their engineering class, taking up space, we're really trying to figure out what that space is going to look like and logistically. So absolutely, we do not want, and the other thing that I really want to communicate with families is, kids don't need to be carrying all of their supplies with them. They need the supplies with them for, the first week, and they can, because they're home every other day, they can be replenishing those supplies as they go. And so so we meet with team leaders and have regular conversations, and that's one of those things that we're talking about. So absolutely, that's not healthy.
That'd be great, and it'd be great if some more communication could go to parents about the fact that they should not be bringing in 70 pounds every day.
Yeah.
Because my son feels like he's got to carry it all.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a start of middle school kind of phenomenon. I remember my kids well, it was on the list, I have to bring all of it.
Yeah.
And I think it's definitely something that they work out with their teachers.
Yeah, and this year was we had a lot more stuff on the supply list than we have in years past, just because there's no sharing of supplies, and we've had to limit that. And so it definitely is magnified this year, there's no question about it.
Well, I think agility is like the word of the year. I mean, everybody has reimagined everything that they do. And I just, the work that you have done and the way you've done the cohorting model, when I know you invested so much in the team model, I'm sure it was really difficult to kind of think, how the cohorting model could keep that, the spirit of the team model going forward. And I just, everyone is just so thankful for all the work you've done to enable the kids to get into school. So
thank you.
Thank you for that.
Of course, thank you.
Thank you.
Really, we're so lucky to have you, your teachers, the teachers who are teaching remotely, the teachers who are just juggling all the changes and figuring out during these first couple weeks what's working, what isn't working. And again, as we said to Mr. Bishop, as you figure out if there are gaps in what you need, please communicate with the school committee, obviously through Dr. Kavanaugh, about ways we can support you.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Would anybody like to make a motion to approve the handbook addendum?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion by Meg, second by Leah. All in favor?
Yes.
Aye. All opposed? None. And so it passes. Thank you very much. Good luck to you.
Thank you so much, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ellen.
Both. Okay, I think we are on to, I think we're on to policy BBA. That's correct. My glasses are fogging. Yep, new school committee policy BBA. This is a very administrative agenda item. You enjoyed the one on communication so much, I thought I'd bring back another one. So policy BBA is an MASC policy that basically just defines the duties and responsibilities of the school committee. And there are two reasons why I'm recommending that we put this in the policy manual. One is for transparency and clarity for the community to understand what we do. And another is because we do have a procedure working group. We've only really defined one procedure so far. That was last year's work on the superintendent evaluation. But this would be a policy under which to hang any procedures that we define for the work that we do. So I'm suggesting it for consideration. It is a first reading, but the intent of BBA is, as I said, just to articulate what it is that we do. And just for the members at home, if you haven't had a chance to, people at home, if you haven't had a chance to read it, there are 5 functions that are listed. One is legislative and policy making. As you heard us discussing the handbooks, or anytime we're discussing policy, that is a main function of school committee. One is appraisal. The committee is responsible for evaluating the effectiveness of its policies and implementation. Provision of financial resources is number 3. Obviously, we oversee the budget and the spending. Number 4 is public relations. You've seen us out at office hours, and we in the last few years have been really doing a concerted effort to hear what the community is concerned about and to help the community find the right place to get answers and to share information that has been put out there. So public relations is big and does tie into our last meeting's discussion on communications. And the 5th function that is listed here is educational planning and evaluation. It's helping to establish the goals and policies that will guide the committee and the staff and the administration. And on the bottom of this policy, it talks about personnel matters. The committee is responsible for evaluating the superintendent. So I don't know if members have concerns about adding a policy like this. We certainly don't have to approve it tonight. It's a first reading. But I just wanted to share with you my rationale. Again, it's transparency, and it's to give us a place to hang procedure work.
So when we met for the policy working group, we debated a little, but at least to me, what I like about this is that if you go into, it's basically the law. It's but if you go and look for our duties in the law, you go to like 20 different sections, and you're trying to tie things together. And this just basically grabs it all and puts it in one place, which seemed like a good thing, especially not only for parents, but when we have new people coming in, we can point them at a very clear, succinct definition of the things we do. So yeah, I'm very pro putting this into policy.
Thanks, Leah, for that explanation of it. That's really helpful. Was this written? Is it something that the Mass Association of School Committees wrote and we're just kind of adopting? We didn't write this.
No, it's in their reference manual. They
Excellent.
have many policies. A lot of them restate law, as Leah said, and we generally take the approach of if we don't need it and it's already in law, we don't necessarily have to have it in the manual. But in some cases, it does provide clarity, and some of our duties are sort of span a bunch of laws, and this, as Lisa puts it, in one clear place.
Thank you.
So I like it for the reasons that both you and Leah have said. Also, I find that when you do track down the pieces of MGL, it's not always as reader-friendly as this is much more readable. I don't know if we want, I don't have any particular comments about things that would change, except to say that where it says the school committee shall appoint upon the recommendation of the superintendent, I think we should take out the parts of the named positions that we don't use, like make it say assistant superintendent and take out associate and deputy.
That makes sense.
And that in school business administrator, we use director of finance and stuff. Put the titles that we actually use for those positions, yeah.
Good idea. Dr. Kavanaugh, did you have any concerns about the wording of this policy in your working group discussion?
No, we did not. No, but I do like Nancy's recommendation of changing those titles. That makes great sense for us.
We typically do multiple readings on a policy. This is a very internal policy, but we can certainly leave it out for another reading, just because that's what we typically do. So maybe I'd recommend doing that, even though we don't have any edits. People are very occupied with other things right now. And if there's something here that catches someone's attention, it'd probably be nice to give them another week or two to look at it.
Yep.
Good.
Okay. So, see, that brings us to item F, donation of the FLIR infrared elevated skin thermometers.
Okay, sure. So we have, I think each school building right now has one of the infrared skin thermometers, and I think that we actually sort of have them right now kind of on loan from the town side. And we had a family who, one of the parents actually works for a company that makes them, where we could get them for a very discounted price, but they very generously offered to pay for us to get 5 additional thermometers, and I think the nurses were thrilled to have them in one more in each one of the buildings. And so I am looking for the school committee to accept this gift from the Bates family in the amount of $225, and it's very specifically 5 infrared elevated skin temperature thermometers.
I move to accept the gift.
Motion by Meg,
Second.
second by Leah. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you so much. That was such a generous offer and so timely. So thank you
Yes.
so much
Yes.
to the donor.
It was very lovely.
That brings us to old business, school committee professional development. I just wanted to follow up to enable Nancy, hopefully, to work on scheduling with visions. We do have this component, and if people, we haven't really closed, can we authorize Nancy to work with town members, as last year with Don Ronan and others, to
With the Youth Commission.
the Youth Commission, to hold part 2 of our training? And when would be a target time, like maybe January? I'm not sure. Now is a bit hectic, but I'm wondering if we could at least kind of pick a general time of year and give Nancy authorization for that. And the visions training really is around social justice and appreciating differences, and it's helping to combat racism and bias. So I really enjoyed and benefited from the really largely self-awareness that I got out of the last training. So it is something, as has been said many times before, that it's not something you do once and you're done. This is a change in habits and lifestyles and thinking. It's an ongoing practice, and I am looking forward to part 2 personally. So if members are okay, I'm just looking to ask if we can, it would be a half day,
Correct. It is a half day. It is,
like
How
about a
is
4-hour
good?
session sometime in
The
the
winter,
future. Like maybe January or,
dependent upon the spread of COVID.
yeah, it's true. It may end up having to be a virtual training, I would assume.
But that's good that we'd even have that option.
So just 2 comments. One is I would love to have it as soon as possible, within the constraints of everything else we have going on, just because it is that important. But secondly, do we have a budget for that professional training? And the reason I ask is because I'm still looking into the Boston Foundation work, and I am looking for training on how to apply it to policy specifically. So I would love the visions
yeah.
training, but I would also like to be able to continue to look at how to implement something at our level that we can actually use within the committee.
do we know at all ballpark what the cost is?
I don't remember, but I think the issue is that Youth and Family Services paid for our portion of the training in that we had committed and voted last year to pay for the second portion, which was significantly less expensive than the first one. I don't see why
So
we
we're
can't pursue.
committed to paying for this portion already? Okay,
Yes,
I did
but
not
I
know
don't see
that.
why we can't pursue
Okay.
doing both, and
Right.
then once we have more of an idea of the cost of the second one, figuring out the funding
Okay.
for it. Because
Makes
that
total
sounds like
sense.
something really timely and necessary for the work that we do.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
the only reason really I'm suggesting we put the visions off a little bit is because it was so nice to do it with town partners. And it's
Yes,
hard to
well,
coordinate everybody, so
And we
if you
kind
can
of
do it
have to do
sooner,
it. We
you
kind of
know.
have to do it
Yeah.
with our town partners, and that would also include, we had town employees as well who participated. But I can talk with Dawn, who's the chair of the Youth Commission, as well as we can reach out together to see what Vision's availability is, because those are all kind of factors, and then get some dates to throw back to you guys in terms of what works.
Yep, that's great.
That would be
Thank
great.
you, Nancy.
Excellent.
Thank you.
And I would love to hear more, and to see a proposal brought forward on the policy, that, what
As
directly.
soon as I find the correct person and I start to get some information, I will gladly bring it.
We've had a lot going on.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Kavanaugh, your goals.
Okay. So the last time we were together, we looked at 4 out of the 5. So if it's okay with the committee, I will just present the one missing goal. Please, let's make that nice and big for you. So this is the student achievement goal. And before I start talking about this, I do want to say that this goal is really dependent upon a lot of people who work in the Hopkinton Public Schools, so it probably starts with Jen Parson and Deb Moriarty, who is our K-5 ELA coordinator, and who in past years had been kind of a coach in the district, and now she's moved into an administrative role, and she's a person who is able to really bring people along, I think, in the way of, looking at how kids learn about reading and writing and thinking about text and interacting with text. And then in sort of that trickle-down way, what will end up happening ultimately is this will impact like all of our teachers who are teaching ELA, K-5, and even grade 6, now that we have, reading instruction in grade 6. And I guess I want to talk a little bit about sort of teachers almost K-12, because this is where I think our district is very different from a lot of school districts. We have people who are incredibly devoted to their craft, incredibly innovative, incredibly creative, and a goal like this one is only possible because of that. So, I do want to thank all of the people who, will be impacted by my choosing of this goal really along the way. And I don't want to stop that thanking at grade 6. I think 7 to 12, are also people who are working exceedingly hard every day to make us, as amazing as we are. So the goal here is in grades K to 6 to use our new Fountas and Pinnell interactive read aloud text. We have spent an awful lot of money on those texts, and maybe Jen, you can give me a dollar figure, but it's enormous.
Well, over $50,000 at least.
And what those texts are designed to do is they will help kids to grow their cultural and maybe even social emotional kind of awareness, but at the same time, kind of the goal is to get kids to engage in those tasks that are inferring and visualizing and connecting and synthesizing, and not to just do that in isolation, but also to be able to have conversations with one another or teachers. And if you take a look at, and this might be a strange way to do it, but if you look at number 6 under process benchmarks, those skills don't live in isolation. So it's kind of a three-pronged approach that we would have kids using those interactive read-alouds while they're also engaging in foundations that will help them with phonics and phonemic awareness, while they're also looking at vocabulary instruction and word study to kind of get that, that word attack and breaking things down etymologically and that sort of thing. So it's a part of what we're doing, but it's the new thing, really, that we are doing. So, we haven't been in school since March 10th, and typically what would happen in a normal school year is that we would be doing BAS testing. And that involves every single kid, and it's a lengthy process, and we often have paraprofessionals and subs covering the classes while teachers are doing that, and we feel like it's way too much right now. So all of our students will be taking the STAR reading assessment, and that's a very quick, online, nationally normed kind of test. And then the kids who will take the BAS will only be the kids that we looked at with the STAR, and we thought, maybe those are students that we need to know a little bit more about as readers. And then our students in grades 4 to 6 will be given the QRI test as well. And then that way there we can kind of triangulate the data and see where our kids are with reading. Ultimately, the goal is that by November 1, students are going to have completed 2 text set units with their teachers. as a result of that, we'll start to see those skills developing, that they're able to talk about text in small groups in that one-on-one setting. We'll be able to see how they're interpreting and responding to literature and all of that. In January, our K-5 students will all be BAS tested, and a lot of this, of course, is predicated that on our doors still being open, but that will happen in that face-to-face kind of setting with a teacher. And that will give us that sense of, where kids are, in looking at within the text, beyond the text, and, about text data. So, that's really how we're going to be looking at, what kids, kind of know and are able to do as they are able to, interact with text. The teacher then will be able to take a look and say, what is it that this individual child needs? What is it that this small group needs? If we pull a small group, they'll have like needs. And then ultimately, as we get to the end, our principals already do this, and our teachers already do this. They maintain what we call watch lists, and so it's really just a means to kind of progress monitor. Where is this particular student? If there's an area to work on, what is that area to work on? I mean, sometimes it's just, English isn't your first language, so it's language acquisition. Sometimes it's, here's a kid who struggles to decode. So whatever the issue happens to be. So we keep watch lists, and the STAR and the BAS data will determine if kids will have actually made a full year's worth of growth in terms of reading skills and in terms of being able to interact with text. And then the last piece that we'll have in terms of product benchmarks is just observational data. Teachers are going to be interacting with kids all the time. They'll watch all of those reading behaviors. They'll be having dialogue with kids. And then we'll have a good sense of, can kids talk, not only about content, although that is important, but, even the meaning and the features of text. And hopefully at the end, our kids will actually find joy in reading literature. And I was having that conversation with Deb Moriarty, and we talked about when a student reads a particular text, and if it's just sort of a one and done, we're all going to read this novel, but there are a lot of texts that we would call dead-end texts, right? They don't bring a whole lot of joy or intrigue to a kid, so they go through that text, they read it, and then they're kind of done. And there was nothing about that text that said, what I really want to know more about. So when we have these sort of series of shorter reads, it will engage kids in, I'd like to read something more by that author. I'd like to read something more on that topic. I really like things that have humor. So that will, I think, perpetuate some interest in different kinds of text on the part of our students. So that's what I'm looking at for K-6, and we'll be looking at, the process and product benchmarks along the way, and interacting a lot with Deb Moriarty. I pretty much told her I'd be hitching myself to her wagon, so I'm sure she's looking forward to it. But
are these actually physical texts, or is this
they
digital?
are, yes, you
Like
actually
actual
hold
paper?
it in your hand, yes.
Love it.
Me too.
Does anybody have any questions? Joe?
Yeah, I have a question. I want to make sure I understand what the BAS test is, because I guess I'm cautious about over-testing kids, and there's no shortage of consultants out there trying to get their hooks into districts so that we use their software and they provide us the data and the test results. And you can get to a point where the testing and the check-ins and the assessment is getting in the way of the kids' natural development that would have overcome the deficiency. But what I liked is you said in January, the BAS test will be administered one-on-one by the teacher. So that led me to believe, maybe we're not talking about a software test. What is that January one-on-one assessment look like?
So when we do STAR reading, I think STAR takes about 30 minutes with kids, and that's an online nationally normed. You're right, they just sit and take that test. And, STAR would be something you'd give again at the end of the year, and it will give you, the grade equivalent. So Joe Markey took the test, and he's reading it at 2.3, second grade. But when you do the benchmark assessment test, that will give you a much better sense of kids' reading behaviors. What are some of the things that you are doing well? What are some of the things that you're not doing well? Can you decode? Do you, have fluency? Those kinds of things. And it's a one-to-one kind of a test. So the teacher does sit. It takes a long time, and I think that's one of the reasons why we're not doing it this fall, is just because we want to kind of get in, and we'd actually rather have kids kids working and reading
Yeah.
and learning as opposed to doing what you're talking about,
Okay.
Joe, that sort of over-testing.
Good, I like it.
So I have probably a little bit of a weird question maybe, but since we were just talking social justice, a lot of normative normed assessments, even if they're country norm, tend to have a bias for underrepresented kids getting lower scores, et cetera. Have we looked into it with our STAR assessments and just verified that that's not the case, that they have a more heterogeneous sample across the board?
You mean when people are taking that test nationally?
Right, so that they have the demographics, right? So like, our minority kids have the same sort of spread that the children who are Caucasian have, that, et cetera?
So I don't know that we have done that. I know that, STAR is given in a lot of places because it's that kind of quick and easy test to give. So my guess is that, and I do know that a lot of, districts that are, in urban settings that want to get a real quick read on kids will use a test like that. One of the things about the STAR test is there is a button that you can click that says, I'm a Massachusetts student and I take the MCAS test, because that actually puts us in a different place with that in terms of our kids' results. Like, it brings us to a place where we expect more in Massachusetts than they would nationally. But no, we have not looked at, I don't think we have, Jen. Have we looked at that?
No, I'm not aware that we have done that, and I think it's a good question. We can look into that.
Yeah, I would really appreciate it. I mean, I know that just the change in ability is good, right? So the fact that it measures the one-year change is a great thing. I just want to make sure that we're not accidentally doing a test that's biased one way or another.
Yes. And I do agree with you. I'm very worried about standardized tests, right? I mean, so
Yeah,
many of them, the
exactly.
test itself, regardless of where it's even given, but some of the questions themselves are certainly geared toward, if you are, white and Eurocentric, you have a much better shot of answering that question correctly than if you're not.
Yeah, I used to actually be certified to do IQ testing after college, and it's amazing the questions that had to be taken out that you would never consider to be biased, like from your point of view,
Absolutely.
that were causing major issues. So that's why I'm a little careful with this sort of thing. But thank you.
Sure.
I would appreciate that.
I just think the other thing I wanted to add into Joe's point about not wanting to over-assess our students, and I think Carol explained clearly why we omitted one assessment from this fall, because we really wanted to focus instructional time with students in instruction when they've been out for so long. But I think that's also why we have multiple assessments that we administer, because we don't hang our hat on any one. Even the MCAS, it's such a big deal. We always use that with multiple criteria. So we're not looking at one measure and saying this is the be-all, end-all, and categorizing kids based on that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Can I just ask a question about the BAS? I know it's really good for typical readers, but for students who have a reading difficulty like dyslexia, it often gives them a flat profile, and it doesn't measure their ability to understand content if they ear read. So what kinds of assessments are offered to students with reading disabilities?
Probably, and this may, I guess I would want to defer to all of the people who are special educators at those grade levels, but I do know that we are using, LLI quite frequently. And, when you do like the running record that goes along with that, so then it will be like, did you miss a vocabulary word? Did you sort of stumble over a word? And those kinds of things. But that's really where we are. We're still BAS users, STAR reading users, running records, those kinds of things.
Because I think it's very easy to miss the spikes of intelligence of students with learning difficulties when you measure them with inappropriate tests. So you don't get a sense of their ability to comprehend what they're hearing as opposed to reading, which may always be a difficulty for them. If you're born with one leg shorter than the other, it doesn't get fixed over time,
Right.
no matter how much PT or OT you do.
Yeah, and I did just take a course in dyslexia, and, how do we identify it? So we do now have a dyslexia screener in the district. And one of the
Yay!
things that...
Can we all say hallelujah for the
Yes.
first time in the history of Hopkinton? Really?
We really do. Yes, we've
Wow.
actually had it for a couple of years.
Awesome.
But it is kind of amazing, the percentages of people who are dyslexic, and some go undiagnosed for a very, very long time. And the longer you go undiagnosed, the less likely you are to ever be able to read at, a particular grade level. So, the course that I had taken was pretty interesting, because you get to see how dyslexia operates, how reading operates in a typical brain. Like, your brain is not designed to read, but as kids start to read, it actually changes the formation of the brain. And if it doesn't work that way in a dyslexic student's brain, then without those changes that happen in the brain, reading just becomes stumbling all the time. But you're right, because there are many, many brilliant people who are dyslexic, but they have to use other means where they hear and see and in order to gain content, and we have to be careful. We have also added programs like Wilson and Orton Gillingham to ensure that those students who are diagnosed dyslexic in the district now get an instructional tool that is actually better, more appropriate for dyslexic readers.
I think those are great for the elementary students. I'm just interested in what tests are being developed now that there's an increased awareness that kids with reading disabilities have a level of intelligence which isn't connected to in school. And so we need to develop different forms of assessing their behavior instead of forcing them to, read fluently like we do, which they never will.
Mm-hmm.
They never will, but we keep forcing them to do it instead of offering them audiobooks and voice to text from the get-go when they're little.
Mm-hmm.
So they gain a confidence in themselves, which they don't have because most everything is geared towards eye reading.
And I don't, and I think you're onto something there, because I think that, maybe in content areas, we worry about what kids know in, say, science or social studies, for example. But I think in ELA, the measurement is typically, how well do you read? And then we always write in response to reading. Right? We do a lot of writing in the service of reading is what I would call it.
And that is just not an equal education.
Yeah.
That is really discriminatory.
Mm-hmm.
It's like making kids who can't walk get up and try to run a race and grade them on that. So I really hope going forward, this is something that we'll look at, because at least 15% of the population has a reading difficulty like that.
Yeah. How many people took the dyslexia course, Jen? Do you remember? There were quite a few.
Yeah, it might have been about 10,
Yeah.
I'm thinking. It was a
We
good
did
number.
put about 10 people into that course, and it was really nice to see them in there. And they are all people who teach K to 5?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great.
So I don't know if you have any more questions about this, which was my my second student achievement goal in theory.
My only comment is that, I periodically look at the MCAS results, by gender. I tend to look, we look all different ways, and every once in a while I sort of check in, and I seem to remember spying that our boys sometimes drop off in their ELA at a certain point, right about 5th grade. And I guess I'm wondering, part of me is hoping that these small texts with diverse topics can help, as you said, sort of rekindle or maintain the joy of reading. I'm not sure what exactly is happening with our boys at that certain point, and I can make guesses, but I don't have any educated knowledge of what actually happens. But I'm hoping that this will help pull all different kinds of kids with all different kinds of interests, keep them engaged in reading. And I don't know if you've thought about whether or not this program might be more consumable for some of the boys at that age of the upper elementary, sort of early adolescent age.
I can tell you that there was a lot of work already done using these materials at the Hopkins School. They were really the first school to pilot the use of these, really under Vanessa's direction. And the feedback on the texts, and we had the opportunity to go in and do some walkthroughs last year and see students using them, and they are really representative of varied cultures, varied interests. They're incredibly high interest. They're very current. And we've now expanded this both downwards, all the way down to kindergarten and upwards through the 6th grade. So that comes with putting different types of text in students' hands and access, and training for our teachers. So 6th grade teachers typically are not trained in the same way that our elementary school teachers are in terms of these small groups and really matching text to readers. And with the work that Deb Moriarty's doing with Mr. Keller and our 6th grade team, I do see some real opportunities to start selecting more appropriate interest-based books for our students that are still going to get the job done. In terms of comprehension and all of the skills that, you were kind of referring to, Meg, that are really important for our readers.
So important, and they're continually overlooked.
Yeah.
And so these kids grow up thinking they're stupid because they can't read. And they can't read, so give them another venue.
The other nice thing that's happening kind of through Deb's leadership in this area is the BAS, these interactive read-alouds. All of these things are they're interconnected, so we're not pulling from here and pulling from there. We have different resources, but they're all based on the same philosophy by the same researchers. So the teacher instructional tools that they're using to really learn how to understand the individual reader, all of the work that they're doing is backed by the resources that they're using with students in the classroom. So I think we have a really nice cohesive plan for our readers, K through 6 specifically, which is what we were focusing on.
I just want to add really quick to what Meg said. I think the read aloud and the discussion piece is really great. I have a son who graduated a year ago who read at the 12th grade level from 7th grade but couldn't write because he had OT issues. And so he was never put in classes where the literature he read was up to the level he could read, because everything was assessed based on writing. And so I really like the idea that these assessments have discussions in them and have out loud pieces in them, and so you're really kind of talking to what the kid knows as opposed to how well they can put a pencil to paper. So in that sense, I really appreciate that opportunity being added for students.
And will these bundles be sent home to the remote students? Will we send texts home? How will they access this?
Yeah, so there are some online components, and another thing that they're doing with a lot of collaboration is they're creating some slides with images from the books, so the teachers are able to really use them remotely with the students, so the students can still see the pictures and access the text from home. I just want to add one more thing, because I know we focused on the elementary level, if you don't mind me adding and jumping onto your goal. But I do think it's, but I do want to make sure that people know that a lot of the summer curriculum development work that was taking place over July and August, especially at the secondary level, our teachers really focused on culturally proficient practices, looking at texts that meet a more diverse group of learners and that represent a more diverse group of authors. And so when I look at the plans that the teachers are putting forward, there was a lot of time, especially at this high school and the middle school, delving into different texts that will help really engage our students. So I'm really excited about the prospects and some of the purchases that we made to help think about how you capture those students.
That's wonderful.
So are you looking for a vote on your goals? Did you want to ask for any amendments to this goal or any of the other goals? Where are we? Are we ready to vote?
If you are comfortable with that, that would be fine.
I'm sorry, but it sounded to me like there were requests to do things in addition to what's here. And we had a nice, friendly conversation about it, but does it need to be captured in here, Meg or Leah?
I would love it if it were captured here.
For me, the comments I made initially may go better with the social justice piece, just adding something about, checking the norms being used and verifying that they are equitable norms. So I think it would fit better there, because then it would be broadly applied.
And your question, Leah, is really specifically about the star rating assessment.
Mm-hmm.
So are you suggesting that we put a benchmark under the diversity goal for evaluating the STAR? You have a
Or-
diversity goal.
Right, what I was saying is on the diversity goal, and feel free to tell me if I'm adding too much to what you're trying to get done in a year, so I'm I'm okay with, you know, just making a point of it, but in the diversity goal, just adding kind of the consciousness of looking at any standardized tasks for biases that might affect our underrepresented students.
Yeah, and I think I would be happy to look at the STAR reading, but I think I would worry about, you know, if I undertook the STAR reading and the MCAS test and the
Yeah.
QRI, it would end up being, you know, an enormous research project as opposed to, you know, something that just kind of
Okay.
asks us, are we really using an assessment that is kind of valid and just, you know?
Okay. I'm good
I'm
with
happy to
that.
add that to the diversity piece.
So Megan, your point is it something that belongs here, or is it a suggested separate goal for?
Well, it's
year.
complex because usually this is shoved off to IEP, to student services, but it does affect such a large section of the population. I don't know if there's some way to incorporate that in there. You know, an appropriate testing of a young child's ability to comprehend what he or she hears rather than what he or she reads. Because you can tell pretty quickly whether or not a child has dyslexia. But if you keep trying to teach them that same thing for 6 years, you're just boring them to death and making them lose their confidence. So what assessment can be given to a 6, 7, and 8-year-old which measures their ability to ear read? I don't know if you've heard that term before. You know, but I think it's important to acknowledge that as a real strength and skill that can be measured and assessed.
Is that a different goal, do you think, or is that something that goes here?
Well, I think it's part of the same goal, but there's no explicit assessment.
Yep.
For students who ear read. They're only assessments for students who eye read.
Is it an additional, adding an additional process benchmark? Would that be able to address that appropriately?
I don't know what that process benchmark would be, though. I need to go do some more
Oh,
homework,
yeah.
you know?
I know, as I think about it, in some ways, we'd have to sort of identify students who have been diagnosed with dyslexia. And, like, I'm not sure that this would sort of work, because I think what we're saying is that this doesn't work for students who are identified as having dyslexia.
Maybe it's worth even just noting that in the goal,
Yeah, I think.
that there's a segment of the population which is not being attended to here. You know, we don't have to put it that way, but that's what we mean.
And I do think, you know, when we send 10 people to that course and we train people in OG and get a dyslexia screener, I think we are working toward that population, because I think for, you know, when I arrived in Hopkinton, you know, we started having these conversations, and I do feel like the students who are diagnosed with dyslexia are kids who are an underserved population. You know, when we read the statistics and say like up to 10% of your population could be someone who has some form, whether it's, you know, extreme or whether it's very mild, of dyslexia, you know, that leaves us in a pretty precarious place, I think, you know, not knowing that. And then, you know, you'll have a student who, you know, the gap in grade 2 is he's still reading at a 1.5 grade level, and then in grade 3 he's only reading it at 2, and then in grade 4 he's still reading it at 2, and grade 5 he's reading it at 2.5. So the moving along is so much slower that the gap gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And you're right, we do the same thing over and over and over unless we implement something like an OG or, you know, ear reading or those
And
kinds
even
of
that
things.
has its limitations, I must say. My son's had OG every day, you know,
Yes.
5 days a week for 3 years.
Yep.
But he still reads at a second grade level. but his ability to listen to something or to watch a video and absorb it and then talk to you about the intricacies of Napoleonic warfare is astonishing, but that's not measured. So how can we create assessments that measure a child's ability to think critically and to articulate complex ideas? Because I remember when we did our one day of the pretend simulated school here with you and Jen teaching your marvelous lessons, and I remember the focus of yours, which, sings to someone like me, was on being able to read complex texts and how important it is to develop that skill in high school. And I thought my son would just go away and weep after this class because this is not made for him. So how do we reframe it even for our teachers to speak about comprehension differently? It's not all measurable by how quickly you can eye read.
Or maybe what this could allude to is the possibility of a child needing an assessment, right?
Well, we already know that. I mean, that's what the STAR reading assessment should do.
Oh, no, I mean like
that's-
a determination, like they do an assessment and it shows something that should spark the teacher to then go on to determine whether, to ask, special resources, et cetera, to determine whether the child might have something like.
I guess I'm not making myself clear, because I think it's easy to determine a child is stumbling in those ways, but you have to really change your framework about measuring their intelligence and their ability to communicate their ideas. It's not only done through writing with a pencil and reading with your eyes, but everything in school measures a child's performance that way.
I have to do a time check. Okay. So we can either vote all the goals but this one. We can come back one more time and let you have maybe an offline discussion about this, or we can suggest that the goal that you're talking about be a new goal for next year that's articulated specifically. To me, I don't know that much about this topic, but it sounds like there's quite a lot to it. I'm not sure how we can fold that in. I think this goal is sort of separate from the goal that I'm hearing is missing.
Yeah, it's different.
Dr. Kavanaugh is limited in how many goals she takes on.
Student achievement goals should include all children.
So do you want to have a separate conversation and come back next week? Or are we comfortable with where we are this year? And that's something, as we've been laying the foundation, that we can bring to a full goal for next year. I don't know. I don't know enough about the topic, but I want to just see what we want to do tonight, because we have till 9:05 on this topic, I think.
I just worry, it's pushed off and it's pushed off and it's pushed off.
I'm on board with Meg, but I haven't heard it, with all due respect, Meg, I'm all on board with what you're saying, but I haven't, it's what the superintendent presented is very specific goals, but what I'm hearing from you is more like a philosophy. And we don't have something articulated to put in here. But I would like to, and if you could work with the superintendent to craft a bullet here or something, I would be in favor of that. But it doesn't sound like we're going to get there tonight.
No, we won't.
And I still wrestle with where it belongs, because part of what I'm hearing is a broader philosophy around how we are acknowledging different abilities, and that's more of a diversity. Like, it's sort of how we approach assessments. I don't know. I'm hearing a lot in what you're saying. I agree with Joe. I think there's a place somewhere, but I don't know how to solve it tonight.
I don't know how to solve it tonight or even in the next week. But student achievement goal is limited.
Every year it's limited. I think last year it was secondary school, mostly. I think every year it's a piece of the student body that gets a focus.
So student achievement goal for typical learners.
In this case, young typical learners. But I think that's.
That would actually
they
make
have
me
to be
feel
specific.
more comfortable.
The student achievement goal label is standard with the format of the goals.
Yeah. I mean, so Meg, the reason I brought up what I brought up is that I have a nephew who's the opposite. So he can read just fine, he can hear just fine, but he can't parse what he's hearing fine. So it's almost like an auditory dyslexia. And so that's why I was thinking, like, this is an interesting place because either one of those issues would probably cause a problem in this particular goal.
Yeah, and I, maybe this is not the time or the place or even the set of goals to tackle this in, but I just don't want it to fall quiet again and another 4 years go by and we're still not teaching the kids who learn best through ear reading.
And I think, I just have one question for you, Meg. Is what you have in your mind right now, is it less instructional than it is assessment? Because it feels like you're saying that you'd like to know how we measure what a child diagnosed with dyslexia knows about content, right? As opposed to how are we teaching that child to read or grow his fluency or grow his decoding skills or expand his vocabulary. It's more about how do we know what that child knows?
Well, it's understanding what you have there. How do they infer, visualize, connect, and synthesize through ear reading?
Right.
It's the same set of skills, kind of, but
through a different instructional method.
Yeah. I know we've all been without sleep for 3 months, so I move to end this, and I approve all this, and let's just keep talking about it honestly and not pretend like it's not there.
I agree, it's important.
It's really important.
We tend to take special needs kids and we find what their weakness is and not understand it's maybe a deficiency, and we try to bang, bang, bang against the deficiency instead of maybe might be more productive sometimes finding their strength.
And it's boring them to death.
So,
and it's giving them depression, so let's...
So maybe food for thought for next year's goals, to take all this.
This is good as it is.
I'm good with the
great.
STAR assessment check.
We need a
fine.
motion to approve this, or
I
is it
think
just
if
kind
we're
of?
ready, then sure, I'd take
All
a
right.
motion to approve the goals for the 2021 school year.
So moved.
Motion by Joe,
Second.
second by Leah. Good. All in favor?
Aye.
No.
Aye.
But that's okay. 4-1.
Okay, so don't say
thought
no.
you just
'cause I'll
said
say
you're all good
opposed.
with it.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
All opposed.
Okay, so we have 4 in favor and 1 opposed, and your goals pass. Thank you for all the thought you put into these and for hearing the concerns of the committee.
Yeah, thank you for listening to us
Thank you.
about this.
Oh, no, I'm with you. I really am, genuinely, yes.
Yeah, we just have to find the way,
Yes.
Moving forward, we got to figure out how to measure that
Yes.
stuff.
And what I would like to say is I don't want you to feel like this is not happening because it's not written up there as
Right.
one of those goals. Certainly that's the kind of work that we can undertake,
Yeah.
whether it's written on that sheet of paper or not. Clearly there are so many other pieces of student achievement gains that are happening in the district, and, it just so happens that I picked this one.
Yeah, and I get that, and I really hope we can just keep talking, because I just discovered that dyslexics can hear a text, they have it read to them, and you can triple the speed, and they can still get the comprehension. And none of us can do that.
No.
So, wow, I think there's a lot for us to learn and investigate, just to help kids feel better. That's our job.
Okay, good discussion. Thank you for bringing up the important points.
Can I make a motion to
You
go away?
cannot. No, you cannot. Now, after all that conversation, you need to sit tight for one moment. We have items by consensus. Hold tight, Meg.
Oh, fine, okay. All right, as superintendent, I recommend that the school committee approve the items by consensus as outlined in your agenda.
So moved.
Motion by Meg,
Second.
second by Nancy. All in favor?
Yes.
Aye. All opposed? Okay, that's unanimous. And now,
So moved.
I have a motion for adjournment from Meg.
Second.
Second by Leah, all in favor?
Yes.
Aye. All opposed, none. Our next meeting is currently scheduled for October 1st. It is a regular meeting. Thank you so much to everybody and to the community who's still watching. Have a good night and good luck with the rest of the launch of the school year. Thank you.
Thank you.